Philadelphia Eagles beating the Commanders 55-23. The Eagles going to their second Super Bowl in 3 years, and just like that one a couple years ago against the Kansas City Chiefs as well. Dalton, the most points in a conference title game in NFL history, and tied for the fourth most points in a playoff game during the Super Bowl era as well. The Chiefs offense exploded with a lot of help from their defense. We'll break that down in just a second. Let's go over the highest grade players, though, starting off with the Philadelphia Eagles. Their highest grade player is cornerback Cooper DeJean with an 88.4 grade. Another rookie corner at number 2 in Quinyon Mitchell with an 84.2. You got Lane Johnson, all-pro right tackle, 82.8. Moro Ojomo, D-tackle, 82.5. Oren Burks, linebacker, 82.1. And Jalen Hurts with an 83.3 grade. Let's go over to Washington with their 5 highest grade players. Zach Ertz, tight end, 77.8. You got Cleveland Farrell with a 73.8. Carl Davis Jr. with a 73.5. My guy, Jazon Newton, 66.7. Andrew Wiley, 65.6. And the rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels, finishing with a 64.7 grade in the loss for the Commanders. Dolan, for you, the whole story in this game.
At the end of the day, it's actually kind of the same thing I had for the Bills. The Commanders initially here, and I wouldn't expect this to change much, a 45.6 defense grade.
Yeah.
Look, you give up 55 points. That's where we're going to look. At least that's where I'm going to look. And look, this is another one. We kind of knew this coming in. Even with Jared Goff's turnovers last week for the Lions, the Commanders gave up 31 points in Detroit, and they just happened to outscore them. But it's hard to win those shootouts every week, right? And I think you just have the flaws of this Commander team finally caved in against what turns out to be the best team in the NFC, and rightfully so, right? I mean, just look, 7 yards per play for the Eagles, 12 explosive plays. You know, Quinn, actually, our producer, he pointed this out to me too. He goes, it felt like the Eagles offense was in the red zone all day.
Yeah.
And he was like, can you just look at the number real quick on this? The Eagles ran 66 plays officially in this game. 24 of them were in the red zone. Wow. 24 of them. You're talking
over a third. Yeah.
Over a third of their plays, somewhere between 35 and 40% of the plays were in the red zone. It just was not. This was finally the game. And even honestly, when you look at the Commanders, even the win over the Eagles when they faced mostly Kenny Pickett, they gave up 33 points in that game. So I think the Eagles just came into this week and they felt like, look, this team still doesn't make a ton of stops. As long as we don't turn the ball over like Jared Goff did last week, and they didn't. The Eagles didn't have a single turnover in this game.
Yeah.
And I believe the team that has won the turnover battle in every single game here has won every playoff game, right? Unless that Bills-Chiefs game. Was that Bills-Chiefs game 1-0 Bills? I forget where the turnovers were at with that. But because Allen had a boatload of turnover-worthy plays, but they ended up not being. I think actually the Chiefs, of course, they might have won the first game where they lost the turnover margin. If it's 1-0, like I'm remembering,
I'm looking right now
in my head. But no, the Commanders, Jaden Daniels actually played relatively well, but I mean they got a lot to work on in this team, and they were so ahead of the curve. And getting to this, making the playoffs at all was a massive accomplishment. And then getting this far and winning 2 playoff games, especially the way that they did, is a massive. Now it's just, okay, we have the quarterback, we have some pieces, go fill out this defense. And you know Dan Quinn, he's always building good defenses, right? He's going to get there, but that's what caved in on him. And the Eagles just really, they didn't see them as much of a challenge. They just said we just don't turn the ball over.
By the way, the Chiefs did have 1 turnover, the Bills had none.
Of course. Of course they're the first team. They're the first team to break that streak too. I believe every other playoff game this year, the team that won the turnover battle won the game.
Usually that's the case for almost any football game, period.
It's like 70 or 80% correlated.
Except for the Chiefs, where obviously laws of mathematics don't apply to them.
It doesn't apply at all, of course. But no, I mean, that's where I'm at. This Commanders defense, it was a fantastic season. The flaws of their entire team came out. We'll get into a couple other ones, but I mean, that's it. It's just a dominant effort from the Eagles.
And that goes into my most disappointing as well. The Commanders' D-line and linebackers, really like the front 6, you would say, for this defense. It was a mismatch, and we knew it was a mismatch going into it, but really Washington didn't stand a chance in this game. Eagles averaged 6.4 yards per carry in this game, 2.8 yards before contact per attempt, almost 3 yards before contact per carry. Eagles on 35 rushing attempts had a successful rushing attempt on 21 of them. That's an absurd rate for Philadelphia as well. Bobby Wagner, who's been one of the best linebackers in football all year, also Frankie Louvu, they had sub-50 run defense grades in this game. And the Commanders overall had a 61.7 pass rushing grade. The Eagles' offensive line just flexed their muscles in this game. They dominated at the line of scrimmage. And when you win at the first and second level, and you let Saquon Barkley have a crease and get to the third level, it's over. I don't know if there's any DBs or any secondary in the NFL that is going to be able to tackle that guy.
And
right
further
now.
reference on that 2.8 yards before contact number, if you're right around 2, which is I think where the Eagles are for the season, that's elite stuff.
Yeah.
And they're at almost 3. It's crazy. And then I also think about too kind of the adversity they had to go through in this game, because you're starting out with Cam Jurgens suited up but not playing because he's got a back injury. Landon Dickerson's playing center. They've got Tyler Steen, a backup, playing left guard. Dickerson gets hurt during the game. He had a knee problem during the game that he came out with. Jurgens now comes in at halftime, and none of it matters. They're just blowing people away. I mean, the 2 tackles, especially Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, just special players. And, this is a guy I've mentioned a couple of times, and, of course, as a Jet fan, it kills me. But Mekhi Becton, what he's done at right guard, I mean, he's somewhere around a top 15 guard this season, moving inside to right guard for the first time in his career when kind of he flamed out at tackle for the Jets in the last few years, and he had all his injuries there. Spectacular season he's had, and this has really been, when Mailata has been healthy, this has been the best offensive line in football. They have, I think, when I looked at it before this week, all 5 of their players were in the top 11 at their position. Jurgens was the lowest one as the 11th best center, and all the others were in the top 10. I mean, it's just ridiculous how good their O-line is and how much they can stick to the foundation of their offense, even in big games like this, because of how good that front 5 is.
And especially when both of their centers, Dickerson and Jurgens, both of them were incredibly banged up. It didn't matter. They were just kicking ass in the run game and kicking ass in pass pro as well. Jalen Hurts had a lot of clean pockets to work from in this game. My side of the story, though, Dalton, is that the Commanders had 4 turnovers in this game, and the Eagles scored 28 points off of those 4 turnovers. And if you include the time in the fourth quarter where Washington turned it over on downs, make it 5 times total, the Eagles scored 35 points off of those. They really just took advantage of all the times the Commanders shot themselves in the foot in this game. And you mentioned that stat before of the Eagles having, what was it, how many plays in the red zone have total plays? Total?
24 out of 66.
Yeah, so a big reason for that was the field position game. And their field position off the turnovers or turnovers on downs in this game, they're on the Washington's 48-yard line, Washington's 24-yard line, their own 49-yard line, Washington's 31-yard line, their own 25, and then Washington's 37. They were at midfield or better on 5 of those 6 times they made the Commanders turn the ball over or turn it over on downs. Simply put, the Eagles were the better team. And when you lose a turnover battle by 4 against the better team, you don't stand a chance. And Philadelphia, that's why you end up seeing this being a blowout. I mean, Washington seemed like in the first half they had a shot, right? Jaden Daniels was finding some things, and they're Terry McLaurin, big touchdown. But when you turn the ball over 4 times against the better football team, you're never going to win. And that's what happened in this one.
And it's 2 things. It was really surprising to see that from the Commanders, because all year one of the best things they've done is have elite ball security. A lot of that obviously comes from Jaden Daniels. He was an elite ball security guy in college. He's brought that to the NFL, top 5 turnover-worthy play rate in the league. I thought the one that really killed him was actually the Jeremy McNichols one on the kick return right after the game was still 20-12 with enough time where the Commanders maybe could have gone down and tied it or at least made it a 1-point game, whatever their choice would have been. But that one hurt them because you've got 2 straight touchdown drives, and right off a kick return fumble. And then the Eagles were getting the ball again in the second half, and it was 27-12. Now, the Commanders, that was like the one stop they made all day, was coming out of halftime, but you just can't have game-changing plays and fumbles especially because it's a backbreaker, especially with a defense like this. They won that Lions game because they won the turnover battle, and they've won a ton of games this year because they've won the turnover battle. This one they didn't. You make a great point about that. So all the way around, look, a poor game from them. They're gonna look back on their execution and go, okay, yeah, we should have been better at least with the ball security. But the combination of all of it, like you mentioned, you make all those mistakes, and your defense is already flawed, and they can't make stops. This is what's going to happen.
And also, I know some people might point out, well, hey, listen, when the Commanders beat the Eagles back in the regular season, they lost a turnover battle by 3 in that one. Also, Kenny Pickett was playing most of that game for Philadelphia because Jalen Hurts got hurt in that one as well.
And they won that game at the buzzer.
At the buzzer, yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing, too, is they still gave up 33 points in that game. They couldn't stop Saquon early, and they were still giving up plays, to Saquon, to A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith. I mean, that game, they were a Devontae Smith drop from losing that game, if you remember that one, too. So, I mean, look, Dan Quinn knows what he's got to do to improve this team. The Eagles could stick to the foundation because the Commanders had all their flaws. And look, to go from the second worst team in football to one of the Final Four
incredible.
standing. It's one of the best turnarounds we've ever seen. So credit to them for their season, but you mentioned it, the Eagles, they're just better. That's straight up. They're the best team in the NFC this year, and they get a shot at redemption.
Absolutely. Dalton, your most impressive part from this game?
And for all the pieces the Eagles have, I'm going to sit here and talk about the 2 rookie corners that they drafted. Because, I mean, it's just ridiculous to think, you go, last year, the Eagles were 28th in the league in coverage grade. Right now, they're first by a pretty good margin. And the biggest reason is because they brought in Quinyon Mitchell in the first-round pick. And you and I were talking about this during the game. How in the hell Cooper DeJean fell to the second round, especially to this team?
Shout out Trevor Sikkema, because on the PFF big board, the top 2 corners on his big board, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. They got both of them in the first 2 rounds.
It's ridiculous. And if you want it, because and you know me, I was at the time screaming when people were saying Cooper DeJean's a safety. No, he's not a safety. And when Howie Roseman took both of these guys, I said, okay, I do get it, because some people are, how do you double up at the same spot so high? No,
you do.
Watch.
Yeah, when he's there, yeah.
Well, watch. Quinyon's going to play outside, and Cooper's going to play inside, and they're going to be flying because they're both really good. And Cooper as a slot corner is amazing. But let's just get the combined coverage stats here, okay? Targeted 10 times combined, 5 catches, 25 yards. DeJean had 2 forced incompletions. Mitchell had the incredible interception that was the cherry on top of the game. Quinyon, on the outside, he's been so consistent. So now he finally, after not having an interception in the regular season, got 2 in the playoffs. 85 coverage grade for Quinyon. 88.9 for Cooper DeJean. There's really 2 things that have happened for the Eagles that have jump-started this entire run. One, after their bye week and they started 2-2, they started running the ball like all hell. You lean into Saquon Barkley because, well, he ran for 2,000 yards. You saw what happened there. You saw it in this game again. 2, Cooper DeJean getting put in the starting lineup. Ever since then, it's changed the entire game. The Eagles last year, they were dead last in the league by a mile in slot coverage grade. It was actually the worst slot coverage grade we've seen in 3 years, okay? It was just the fatal flaw of this team. They could not cover in the slot. This year, the 3rd in the NFL in slot coverage grade. And Cooper DeJean's the guy playing in there. As a rookie, you mentioned it. I still, to this day, have no idea how he dropped that low in the draft. He was maybe the most fundamentally sound corner in this draft class. And they got Quinyon Mitchell, who, as an outside guy, might be the most talented. To get both of them and have both of them playing this well this early, it's turned around what was actually the biggest flaw in this team last year, and it was coverage.
I remember on draft night in the first round when they took Quinyon Mitchell, I was like, okay, I love the pick, but I did have Cooper DeJean higher on my board. I kind of wish they would have taken Cooper DeJean. And then somehow he fell to them. And I know they traded up to get him in the second round as well, but they didn't trade enough to make it worth it, right? So Cooper DeJean, just the fact that Howie Roseman was able to get both these guys, in our opinion, Trevor had it as a top 2 corners in the draft. I also thought they were probably top 2 corners in the draft as well. Just an incredible job by Howie Roseman, and yeah, it's paying dividends right now. And talk about attacking a weakness, right? Because there's so often there's the idea of, okay, do you draft for talent and value or do you draft for need? Well, they ended up with both, first of all, because they're both really talented, but also he got to attack by far their biggest weakness on this whole roster with his first 2 draft picks, getting these 2 guys who could both be elite players, and eventually if whenever Darius Slay's off the team too, Cooper could move back outside and play well, I'm sure. Or if you want to leave him in a slot and he's the best slot corner in football, fine. But either way, they're both terrific, and they've been a huge reason for this tournament. And slot corners are absolutely incredibly valuable as well. It's not like, I know there's been kind of a stigma in the past of saying, oh, slot receivers aren't that valuable, slot corners aren't valuable. No, they absolutely are valuable in today's day and age of NFL.
Look at the 2 teams in the Super Bowl.
Right.
And I know McDuffie moves inside and outside, but they value that nickel position as much as any team in the league with these 2 guys.
Because a lot of the times, some of the top receivers in the NFL, they go to the slot, right? So it really is valuable to have a good slot corner. My most impressive part, I got to shout out Jalen Hurts here. Now, I know Saquon Barkley was a superstar. He's been that way all year for them. But the one thing with the Eagles that we've said is like, okay, this roster top to bottom is probably the best in football, right? They got the best defense in football, we would say, the best probably old line in football. You got Saquon Barkley, who many people thought could have won MVP this year as well. He's one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best, one of the best receiving corps in football. The one thing that we said could hold the Eagles back from winning a Super Bowl is whether or not Jalen Hurts can play consistent football. And make no mistake, over the last 3 months, he's struggled, right? He's had a sub-70 passing grade every game since their win over the Jaguars in Week 9. But he bounced back in a major way against the Commanders in this one with an 84.9 passing grade, his highest of the season. He was 20 for 28 for 246 yards and a touchdown. He had a big-time throw, no turnover-worthy plays, almost an 88% adjusted completion rate. Basically, your completion percentage plus any drops your receivers have. So basically on target for 88% of his passes. And of course, 3 rushing touchdowns as well. Could have been 4 if not for a hold on Landon Dickerson. Of course, Bobby Wagner might have made that tackle on Jalen Hurts, so we'll never know. But he was fantastic running the football, fantastic throwing the football. And I understand the Commanders' defense has had major problems all year. But if he performs like this against the Chiefs, I think the Eagles are winning the Super Bowl. Now, that is a big question, right? Because the Chiefs' defense is really good. Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best D coordinators that we have in the entire sport. But I think with that Eagles team that I still think is the best overall roster in football, and you have a quarterback that just plays good enough, they're going to win it all, in my opinion. They're going to get revenge on the Chiefs.
He had the best game of his career 2 years ago in this spot, aside from one play, right? The fumble that Nick Bolton returned for a touchdown. It's going to be the most talked about part over the next 2 weeks of this game is whether Jalen Hurts can sustain, even if he doesn't sustain what he did today, where he did put in a dominant effort against a bad defense. It's a whole different thing you're going against, and Steve Spagnuolo again, and they're going to get to watch the tape from 2 years ago, but that's going to be the biggest X factor is, are the Eagles going to go into this game and be one-dimensional, as they kind of have in a lot of games this year, even their first 2 playoff games they were, right? That's going to be the biggest thing. Is this now the Jalen Hurts moment that he should have had 2 years ago? Because everything else stacks up really well for him. You got the best O-line in football. Got a fantastic defense, arguably the best defense in football. You've got A.J. and Devontae on the outside. You got an absolute freak in the backfield having one of the best seasons by a running back we've ever seen. And that needs to be said more often, too. The 2,000 yards thing obviously got all the publicity, and then skipping week 18, to not go for Eric Dickerson's record. But Saquon's having one of the best running back seasons of all time. And I'll tell you what, if he had a big performance in this Super Bowl and capped it off with, I don't know, something, was he up to 2,500 yards between the two now, or whatever he's at? It might go down as number 1, because it's just incredible what Saquon's doing behind this offensive line and the exact right fit going to this team. And I think that's it. Jalen Hurts is going to be the X factor.
Definitely. What's your most disappointing thing from this game?
Just one other thing for the Commanders. I mean, and they're going to work on it, is their offensive line. It felt, you know what it felt like? It felt like when Sam Cosmi got hurt last week, and they won the game anyway against Detroit, but that's your best offensive lineman by far.
And going against Jalen Carter and those guys.
Yeah, it just wasn't. Oh boy. That was the part that made me as nervous as anything for their offense. Is they were already not a great offensive line, and now you just lost your best player to a torn ACL, and hopefully he fully recovers from that, and he's back to being great next year. But 42.0 offensive line grade in this game. I mean, you got a rookie at left tackle. Tyler Biadasz was struggling with Jalen Carter all day, which most people do. Trent Scott got hurt in the second half, and they're down to third-string right guard. I mean, it was just, again, the flaws of this Commander team eventually caved in on him in a spot like this against an Eagles team with not very many flaws at all, and just kind of the way it goes sometimes. So, I think their offensive line is going to be a point of emphasis in the offseason, and certainly Dan Quinn's going to try to get that defense right.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sam Cosmi was a big, big loss for that team. I loved him coming out of Texas at left tackle. He kicked inside a guard. He's been an amazing guard for them as well. I just thought about this, Dalton, with the Eagles having so many injuries at center. Maybe they call up old number 62 and see if he's got anything left against his old brother.
You can always make a phone call, but it's something tells
the Kelsey Bowl 2.0.
Well, and actually, the interesting part that aside from any conspiracy about that, because I'm sure because there's always talk about J.J. Watt and the Texans too, because those guys are still in shape. But no, I mean, actually, the interesting part is that we know their starting lineup is Dickerson at guard and Juergens at center. They need both of them to get healthy because they're both supposed to be starting, right? So, I think that's 2 weeks.
Chris Jones, too.
Against Chris Jones, I mean, interior protection against the Chiefs is everything, right? I'm sure they feel good about Johnson and Mailata against the edge defenders, but if you can't handle Chris Jones inside, that's problem number 1. It's why the Texans had major issues with him. It's why the Bills had major issues with him. You don't block Chris Jones, you don't stand much of a chance. So they're going to need both those guys healthy. Aside from any of that, it's going to be huge. It's going to be a huge factor in how well those two can recover over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so the Philadelphia Eagles winning in dominant fashion over the Washington Commanders with a 55-23 final score.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.